overwhelming number of people interested in the meeting and have actually hit capacity. So to all of you that are actually in the meeting with me right now, congratulations. And to everyone else, we'll provide a recording. We'll create a recording of this and provide it afterwards. My name's Jeff. I'm from Ayelet Tours. And since 1986, every itinerary we create ends with the same 4 words: the memories last forever. So tonight we're going to create some virtual memories together. We're going to go to Cuba, fly virtually. We're going to experience some of the incredible sights that are down there. We're going to meet with some of the Jewish communities that are so moving and really impressive to see what they've accomplished with so little for so long. So why Cuba? Outside of the fact that it's only 45 minutes away from the southern tip of Florida, this is a vibrant land. The music, the culture, the arts, the rum, the cigars, and beyond that, you have this incredible Jewish community. One of the questions that you answer by traveling to Cuba is, what does it mean to be part of a community? Or in the case of the Cubans, what does it mean to maintain the idea of community in a time when, within a couple of years, 90% of your community members disappear? And then you add on top of that, that you are completely cut off, completely disconnected from the rest of the world. And going down to Cuba and visiting with these communities, you get to answer some of those questions and see what it means to experience that. So this evening, I'm joined by my colleague, Mr. Bill Cartiff. Bill, how you doing?
Hey, Jeff. Hello, everybody.
I can hear you.
How you doing?
Even better. This is Zoom technology. It's
coast to coast.
Coast to coast. So Bill, in addition to leading all of our Jewish singles trips through the Best Day Adventure branch of the company, has accompanied congregational tours and many others to Cuba. Bill has circled the globe countless times. He's been to Cuba probably close to a dozen times in these last few years with various groups. And he's going to be leading us through the virtual tour tonight. A few housekeeping things so that everyone's on the same page. You may have noticed that you've been muted. This is intentional because there's 100 people on the call right now. If you are interested in asking a question or having a question answered later on in the program, just type something into the Zoom chat. I will try to monitor it and get to as many questions as possible. So with that, we're going to get started. Bill, anything you want to add before we get rolling here?
There is, Jeff. There is. You mentioned something about cigars and rum. So I wanted to present everybody with a shot of Havana Club straight from Cuba. Come with me. You'll have a little bit of this. And I want to light up one of my Cubans. There's nothing like, what do I have here? Romeo and Juliet. There's nothing like getting a cigar right off the factory in Cuba, straight from the handmaker's hand. So
this is everyone's cue to sit back and relax. If you'd like, make yourself a mojito or a Cuba Libre, as I know, Bill, you prefer. And we're gonna start with Havana. The pre-recorded section's about a little short of 20 minutes. And then we'll come back together for a Q&A live with Bill.
Hola, mis amigos. My name is Eric. I'm one of Ayelet Tours' local Cuban tour guides. While we're not able to have visitors today, we're looking forward to hosting you in our beautiful country, and it will be my pleasure and an honor to show you around. Please stay safe. And may your families and friends be well. Remember, mi casa es su casa. Shalom you all. Thank you.
all right, everybody, welcome to Cuba. We've just flown. You've been on a very, very long flight, about 45 minutes. And you've traveled to a completely different world, it will feel like. You've landed right here in Havana. And I'm showing you this map so you get a taste of the direction of our tour. Down here is Key West, so you can see just how close you are to Cuba. From Havana, our tour will take us inland a little bit to the city of Santa Clara, Cienfuegos, and Trinidad. See that right here in the middle. For the sake of our tour today, we're going to begin in Revolution Square. This is very famous because this is where Fidel Castro gave many of his very, very long speeches. And it was not uncommon during his tenure for there to be gatherings of 1 million people in this square to listen to Fidel speak. So this whole square, this is sort of akin to China's Tiananmen Square. But on the opposite side of the main square is this monument to Jose Marti. He is a national hero of Cuba and Cuba's independence from Spain. He was a writer, a publisher, and he wrote many interesting and profound periodicals that gave Cuba sort of its personality. This is a very famous place for a lot of the classic car owners to show off their cars. On the first night, we invite everyone to come down to the lobby of the hotel, bring all of their goods that they brought. They can literally dump it at my feet. And between my tour guide and our driver and me and whoever else wants to stay and play, we'll organize all these gifts to divvy up to the Jewish communities as we go visit. And this is what it looks like after you've dumped it at my feet, and we've organized it. We put them in bags, we load them on the bus, and throughout the course of the week, every Jewish community that we visit will get their share of the good. Old Havana is sort of like a city within a city. Think Israel. Think of the Old City. The Old City is a city within the city of Jerusalem. So this is Old Havana. That was just some architecture. Here's a little bit more of the wonderful Cuban architecture. See classic cars all around. And here you'll find in Havana a lot of the colorful dresses being worn by local women who also enjoy a good cigar, but they're really there for you to take a picture with them. And if you are so inclined to do so, they expect just a little bit of compensation for it, generally $1 or $2, and you can take your picture with them. We take you to either a cigar factory or a cigar smoking demonstration that is accompanied by a little bit of a rum tasting. One of the stops along the way in Old Havana is visiting the Raquel Hotel. This is a Jewish-themed hotel, not to be confused with a hotel for Jewish people, or a kosher hotel, or a hotel that looks anything like a hotel in Israel. This is a theme. There is some Judaica spread out through the hotel lobby, and the rooms are named after Jewish biblical people. This is Ilyana. She's another one of our guides. This is a good opportunity for you to see sort of the comfort that you have while traveling with us. She's on a very modern bus. She has a little pad behind her to lean back so she can face the audience. And here our group is meeting the president of Patronato. This is Adela Dworin. This woman is a legend. She is a remarkable, unbelievably dedicated, devoted person to the Jewish community, to the synagogue. When you visit the synagogue, you'll see that the synagogue is not too far off from a familiar type structure in America. That's because of Adela. Over the years, Adela has raised incredible amounts of money to support this synagogue, and it is very well kept, and it is the largest synagogue in all of Cuba. But to hear Adela talk is an experience that every Jew cherishes forever. She tells her story. She tells you about her travels. She's been to Israel. She's been to parts of the US. But she's an awesome lady, and you can't help but really get into your conversation with her. I love her to death. This is the inside of the main sanctuary of Patronato. As you can see, it is very well kept. The second Jewish community that we visit is the Sephardic Center. This is Myra Levy. She's the president of the Sephardic Synagogue. You can see it's a little bit more modest. It's a little smaller. It's not as snazzy. They are housed in a building that they have created a multi-use purpose to help them pay the rent. There's a gymnasium in the building. There's a theater group in the building. But the majority of the building is dedicated to the synagogue and a senior center and a meal room. And this happens to also be where we have Shabbat services and Shabbat dinner. So we come, we meet Myra, we hear her story, we do questions and answers, we meet some other members of the community, we provide her with her gifts for the community out here. And then we have Shabbat services and dinner. But before that, I forgot to mention that also attached to the building is the Holocaust Museum. This is Simon. Simon is the curator of the Holocaust Museum. And we just literally go up the stairs and we visit with Simon, and he takes us on a little bit of a tour through the synagogue's Holocaust Museum. There's Simon talking to us. So this is a very cool view from the inside of the Sephardic Synagogue, looking out onto the street. One of the other essential cultural products of Cuba is art. And there's all different kinds of art and artistry throughout the country. One of the most impressive sites to visit is this little community that is known as the Jose Fuster House. Jose Fuster is an artist who excels in tiles and mosaics, and this is his home, and he has built an extension of his home to show his artwork. And then beyond that, he has actually created an entire community of art like this. So we go and we visit the community. First we visit his home. This is his home. He lives somewhere up there out of sight, but he's still alive, and it's not uncommon to actually see him when you go visit the Fuster home. It's just it's a fun house of art is what it is. And to take a walk through his house is sort of an explosion of your senses. It's very fun. This is just one of the classic cars acting as a taxi, bringing some people up. And as I said, classic cars are pretty much everywhere. We take our group to see the Ernest Hemingway home. We are greeted at Ernest Hemingway's home by this photo of Ernest Hemingway meeting Fidel Castro. When you visit his home is sort of on a plantation, but the first stop is to actually see inside the home and see where he lived, where he worked, where he wrote, and where some of his inspiration was. He was an avid hunter. If you've read any of his work, you know that, and he has pretty much the heads of dead animals all over his house. This is the view. He chose the location for his house for the beautiful view. This is also where his boat is parked. This is the boat that was the inspiration for The Old Man and the Sea. And it's a very momentous experience to actually get up close and personal to this boat. These are graves of his beloved pets, whom he also had buried at his home. So here's a photo of Ernest Hemingway's tower that was built as an extension from his house, because his wife told him he needed to go somewhere else to do his writing rather than sit in the house with her and do the writing. So he came up here for inspiration and to do some of his writing, which he never really did up here. He was kind of a stubborn old man and ended up not really using this tower at all. Another part of his plantation or his home, if you remember the movie the Field of Dreams. The most famous line from the Field of Dreams is what? If you build it, they will come. And Ernest was an avid baseball fan, and he wanted to build a baseball field on his grounds so that once he was no longer on this earth, future children could enjoy the game of baseball. They will always have a place to play baseball. So he built this field right here. Ernest's home is up on the hill that you see up in the background. And this is the baseball field that you first see when you drive through the gates of his home. And yes, of course, there are children playing baseball here. So we took the opportunity to actually get off the bus and join in. You can see there's an adult in the outfield right over here. That's part of our group. Some of us are watching. I actually got a turn to bat, but I didn't take a picture of myself. So it was really fun to interact with the kids. Here's a view from up above from Ernest's home itself. These are the gates that you enter to come into his home. And there's always baseball practice going on. Baseball is the national sport of Cuba, and kids and adults play baseball in all shapes and forms at all hours of the day in all places that you can actually throw a baseball. It's pretty incredible. After baseball practice, a couple people from my group brought some equipment and some baseballs. These kids could not have been more thrilled. They were playing with raggedy old baseballs and raggedy old equipment. To have a brand new baseball handed to them was just the most exciting thing they'd seen in a long time. So another very important part of the fabric of Cuba is music, of course. And music is taught throughout everyone's lives, from young children forever into adulthood. And children love learning all different types of music. This particular group is a troupe called Clave del Sol. They're a group of adolescents and young teenagers learning string instruments. This is sort of a club, sort of like going to baseball practice after school, or Hebrew school, something you did after school. But these kids come together 5 days a week. They practice and they perform. So you all have heard of the Tropicana. This is the Tropicana dating back to 1939. This is the Lucy and Desi show. This is everything, music, costumes, song, dance. These days it's even acrobatics. 3 hours of absolute high energy, colorful, upbeat, musical fun. Generally, we take a group, or we give people the option to go, because it is a late night. The show usually doesn't start either 9 or 10 o'clock, and it goes to at least midnight, sometimes even later. So it's a very late night, but this is a highlight for many people to go to visit the Tropicana on the very site that it's always been since 1939. Now it's time for our classic car ride, and this is a hoot. The group lines up outside the hotel. This caravan of classic cars pull up, they honk their horns, the drivers are all showmen, and we pile in and we go for a ride, an open air ride, weather permitting, through the city of Havana, making a couple of stops along the way for some photos. And we end the tour at our restaurant for dinner. So the classic car drops us off at dinner, and then our motor coach picks us up and takes us home. We take our group to a visit of one of 2 Jewish cemeteries in Havana. This is the largest cemetery. It's in an area called Guanabacoa. It's a very old cemetery that looks like it's not particularly well kept, but it actually is. There are 2 full-time caretakers. I've actually had some group members travel who had relatives. One in particular, a mother and a daughter were part of my group, and the mother's father was buried there. The younger woman's grandfather was buried there, and we found the grave. The records are horrible. It's a handwritten, scribbled notebook that is falling apart, so it's not always easy to find what you're looking for there, but we were able to find their relative, and that was a very meaningful moment. There's also a Holocaust memorial, and of course we'll stop there and we'll say a few prayers and lay some stones at this Holocaust memorial. One night, we'll offer the opportunity to go to a very famous hotel. This is up on the hill, the Hotel Nacional. This is a hotel that is very similar in nature to the Breakers in South Florida, if you've ever been to the Breakers. But this is sort of the hotel from the 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s, where you went to see and be seen. There's lots of remnants left over from celebrities and mobsters and casinos that were all a part of the Hotel Nacional. This little wall of fame sort of shows you a little bit about that, some of the visitors who have been to the hotel in the era that they visited. Here you see the 40s and the 50s, and if we extended the photo, you would see the 60s and the 70s. So this is kind of a fun place to go, have a drink, take a little bit of a tour. It's right on the water, and it's a very beautiful hotel, but very old and very nostalgic. And you can't leave without having a mojito. So light them up. Everybody has a mojito. So back to the essence of music. Earlier you saw the Clave del Sol, the young teens who were learning string instruments. This is a troupe called the Havana Dance Company. These are a group of young adults who are learning the art of dance and mostly drums and drum type music.
So a few questions have come in. That's interesting. Okay. The first one is, can you give some context to how the Jews ended up in Cuba and what the community is like there? Bill, would you like to handle that one, or would you like me to talk about it?
I'd like to talk more about what it's like now. I feel more knowledgeable on the current existence of the Jewish community. So let me do that. So there's several Jewish communities throughout the nation. The highest concentration of Jews are obviously in Havana, and they are primarily divided into 3 different communities. One that visits the Patronato with Adela who you saw. One is the Sephardic synagogue with Myra, who you saw, and then there's an Orthodox synagogue that is not featured on this particular presentation, and obviously it's about as observant as you can be in Cuba. In the interior, there's 2 additional synagogues. You're going to see that shortly, one with David Thatcher. He serves about 25 or 30 Jews, and you'll meet Rebecca Lengus, who serves about 15 Jews. And that may not sound like a whole lot of people, but what they're able to provide for those people is really substantial. In all of Havana, there's about 5,000, no, I'm sorry, about 1,000 Jews that are served. And there's a variety of programs available for seniors, for meal programs, or recreation. So it's active. There are some lost Jews throughout Cuba that have assimilated and are constantly being searched for, to bring into the community. But there are Jews scattered throughout. There's also a community all the way over on the far East Coast, in Santiago, but it's not conducive to our tour to go that far. So unfortunately, we don't get to meet those folks. So that's the current state of the union for Jews there. One other thing, there is freedom of religion in Cuba. There is no anti-Semitism. The government doesn't particularly support our religious endeavor, but they don't discriminate against us either. So if you could say it's because of ambivalence, it's because people don't know we're there. For whatever reason, there's no anti-Semitism. A lot of people who aren't Jewish don't even know what Jewish people are. But there's no security. Jews feel free. Jews feel safe, and there's never any signs of any types of anti-Semitism.
So a couple of things in the chat. Somebody said, what about the interior? Just to clarify, that section of the video, we dealt with Havana. When we finish the Q&A right now regarding the Havana section, we're going to move to a second pre-recorded video section, which will cover the interior. So we'll get to that in a little bit. I did have a question about what life is like there now. What's going on there now with the current situation? Do you want to handle, or you want to take?
Sure. I guess that refers to while we're all within the pandemic. So let me say that even under normal circumstances, getting information from Cuba is always a challenge. Their ability to communicate to the outside world is limited. So even under normal circumstances, it's hard to get information. But fortunately, over the last about 2 or 3 years, they've become a little bit better connected electronically. WhatsApp is a widely used resource to be able to communicate within Cuba and now outside of Cuba. So I've been in pretty regular contact with our 2 guides, Eric and Ileana, and I check on them periodically. So how are they dealing with it? Well, they're kind of dealing with it like we are, only with a Cuban twist to it. We have to stay at home, we have to socially distance, we have to take precautions, and so are they. The problem is they don't have a government stimulus program to give them a boost through all this. But what they do have is they have a regular source of rations that is part of their economy. One of the things that Fidel Castro wanted to make sure of was that no Cuban would ever starve, be homeless, be without a roof over their head, and have the essentials. He didn't give them the opportunity to grow from that, but the basics that people need to survive are provided and are currently still being provided to the Cubans. So they will receive free of charge a certain ration of food every week. They will receive the health care that's free in Cuba. That's a whole separate discussion to talk about the whole healthcare system, but they do get free healthcare. They have the basics. They have Dayenu. You know what Dayenu means, Jeff, right?
Of course, yeah.
It means enough. If you have enough, if you have your health, if you have your family, if you have your friends, and you have enough food to survive, you have enough. And that's what the Cubans know. So they're getting by. Would they like us to come back? Do they want us to bring in our dollars and our people and our goods and our services and things that we do bring? Absolutely.
So one of the things I mentioned at the beginning is in addition to, or as part of visiting with the Jewish communities there, the trips that we bring under normal conditions are generally going with a humanitarian aspect to the trip. So what does that mean? In addition to bringing funds to support the community, a big part of the challenge with living in Cuba and maintaining a Jewish community in Cuba is that it's not just funds, it's resources, it's getting the things that you need. So the groups that go down there will generally bring a tremendous amount of supplies. Bill showed a couple pictures of that. So what are in those supplies? You have medical supplies. You have groups that have brought walkers and wheelchairs, dialysis equipment, things for blood pressure medication. It really runs the gamut. The needs down there are really bottomless, and they came within that period of Cuban perestroika, you could say. The opening up where Americans could go down there, there was a reliance on the supplies that we were bringing, and that is essentially cut off at this time. We're actually working with an organization. I can send something out later if people are interested. We're working with an organization that's trying to arrange for a private charter flight with medical supplies to go from Panama to Havana to bring medical supplies. So we're hopeful that we can take part in that to support these communities that we unfortunately cannot visit right now and are suffering because of it. I had somebody ask about when was the video of the Tropicana taken? I'm not sure. Within the last couple of years, we go down the regular. It's not since the pandemic started. Our most recent groups were there in February and left before all of this craziness started.
I think the photo that I sent you was that particular one because I made sure to get the 1939 to 2019. So I think that particular one was taken in 2019.
Okay. I did have somebody ask, you mentioned it a little bit, but in terms of communication, do Cubans have Wi-Fi in their homes? How are they able to communicate? And you mentioned WhatsApp, but if they don't have Wi-Fi, how are they communicating?
So no one has Wi-Fi in their homes. That is not available. But think back to the 1990s when we had dial-up or we had Wi-Fi hotspots that we would go to, where you had to log in with a little internet card, put in a password, and you would get 60 minutes for your little card. That's what Wi-Fi is like. There are Wi-Fi hotspots throughout Cuba, and again, this is a relatively new phenomenon. This has all happened over the last 3 or 4 years, and you'll find Cubans clustered in places, in parks or in cafes that have Wi-Fi. It's not free. You have to buy the card. You have to scratch off your password, and then you have to log on. And you could get logged out in the middle of something. So, but it is available, and so that's one way of communicating. They do have internet.
I always found it interesting, Bill, that sometimes you'll drive around and you'll pass a park, Lenin Park or one of the other parks, which by the way is John Lennon Park, not Vladimir Lenin Park. A lot of people get confused about that one. But you'll drive past the park and you'll see like a gaggle of people all kind of huddled around one area. And generally that's because there's a Wi-Fi hotspot there. And so they've gone out to search for a Wi-Fi hotspot and they're out there communicating hopefully with the outside world.
But when you're traveling, if you come to Cuba with us, you have to pretty much accept the fact that you're going to be out of touch throughout the day. You will have Wi-Fi in the hotel lobby, and you'll buy your internet card, and you can connect through Wi-Fi. But when you're out and about, there's no 4G network, and you pretty much are off the grid when we're out and about during the day.
So we've got a couple questions that came in. One, did our current U.S. government cancel all travel with Cuba before the pandemic? And the answer is no. there were additional restrictions put onto travel, but the license under which we operate, we were still able to bring groups there. And like I said earlier, we're doing so all the way through February.
It was the leisure travel, the cruise lines that were coming in, the random, without the license that we had, and without the visa that we're able to get for our groups, you were not able to come in. But if you wanted to be part of a group and part of an organized itinerary and do it on a land tour, like what we offered, you could.
So I have a question. Can I use American dollars and credit cards? This is coming from the Upper West Side of Manhattan, this question.
Not in Cuba, you may not. Credit cards are not accepted unless you're using a Canadian credit card. Canadian credit cards are accepted in some places. American credit cards are not accepted. US dollars are generally not accepted. There are a few artists and a few vendors that would be happy to take a US dollar, but for all intents and purposes, you're going to bring your US dollar into Cuba. You're going to exchange it on an as-needed basis at the hotel, and you're going to spend the Cuban convertible peso, also known as a CUC or a CUC, and that's what you'll be spending while you're there. You get a 1-to-1 ratio, 1-to-1 exchange rate. However, there's a 13% service charge because we're Americans. So your $100 will get you 87 CUCs, and that's standard throughout the country, no matter where you exchange.
So a couple other money questions that came in. Somebody asked about bringing euros instead of dollars, which some people do choose to do. Bill, what's your experience with that?
There's a lot of opinions on what to do. My opinion is, if you have euros, bring euros. If you don't have euros, it's not really worth it to exchange your dollars to euros to be able to exchange your euros to CUCs. The euro is 1-to-1. Actually, it's a little bit more than 1-to-1. Your 100 euros will get you about 105 CUCs. But if you got to pay an exchange rate from your dollar to the euro, then it kind of washes all that out. But if you already had euros, yes, bring them.
Somebody asked another related question: is there a black market for money? And I don't recall ever seeing that. I don't know if you've ever come across that.
There is a black market, but that's not for us. There's a black market for Cubans that the government kind of looks the other way for. When we talked earlier about having rations and having limited this and limited that, where do you get more food? Where do you get more an electronic? You know, where do you get a mount for your cell phone? Where do you get a cell phone? You know, you get that through the black market. That's the way that you're able to get it more inexpensive if you're a Cuban. For us, there's no black market. There's really only one way to get money, and it's the way I described. If you're doing it any other way, I don't want to know about it.
Exactly. And which brings to another great question. Are foreigners safe in Cuba? Is there crime against travelers?
Oh my God, Cuba is probably the safest, or one of the most safe places in the world to visit. Much more safer than visiting many parts of the US, and much safer than visiting other foreign tourist destinations. The rules are pretty strict in Cuba. Rules are pretty tight. The most vicious crime that could possibly happen, it's never happened to me or my group so far, is petty theft. But even that is rare. Cubans don't carry guns. Cubans are not allowed to own guns. There is zero gun violence in Cuba. If you own a gun, if you have a gun, you're either a policeman or a registered farmer, or you have to fall under a certain category. You are sent directly to jail if you illegally own a gun. Zero gun violence.
Interesting question, and there's an interesting answer to it. Is there kosher food in Cuba?
Not readily available. Not readily available. The Orthodox synagogue does have a what's it called?
Shachet.
Shachet.
Yeah.
Shachet. And he gets meat, and he is able to kosher it. He is a registered mishkiach.
Mashgiach, yeah.
He is a registered mishkiach. So there is limited amounts
We
of
can play ad libs, Bill. We can do ad libs.
too much. I'm spewing out too much information at once.
Right.
I know these terms. So he's able to kosher minimal amount of meat, and getting it and how much we get and distributing it are all different issues. Kosher food is available thanks to us bringing things in. The synagogues are like stocked with matzah. Groups from Canada are always shipping pallets of matzah when they come in. So sometimes when we go to Shabbat services at the Sephardic synagogue, they don't have the ingredients available to make a challah, so we have matzah. So certain packaged foods that are brought in are available as they have them. But inventory on pretty much anything, kosher or not kosher, kind of rises and falls.
So I would just add to that. Generally, what you're going to see in Cuba is not kosher food. Even at the synagogues, what they're serving for Shabbat is generally not going to be kosher food because they simply they cannot get it. It's not possible to do. They make do with what they have, which leads into another one of the questions. Can you talk a little bit about the demographics of the community? What are the ages? Do they have any educational opportunities? If people want to get out, can they get out? To travel abroad.
These days, people are
pre-coronavirus.
Pre-coronavirus. Everything's pre-coronavirus, but these days, meaning, more recently, Cubans are free to leave if they wanted to go somewhere. Are they able to? Most of them are not. They don't have the resources. They don't have the money. They don't have the passport. They don't know what to do. Most Cubans have never left the island of Cuba. But ever since Fidel passed, there's been some gradual reform in some of the laws. So yes, they are able to go if they wanted to. Some Cubans do, but generally not. What was the second part of that question?
I think that covered it. The education. Oh, the demographics of the community that's there right now.
Yeah. So education is free. That's another one of the provisions provided by the government. Education is free throughout your educational career. You are free to become whatever you want to become. However, it's fascinating to learn that people who are doctors and lawyers and business owners will consider or will actually make the move to not be what we think is a high profile, highly paid position in lieu of working in the service industry. People who work in the service industry are the ones who make the most money. Tour guides, taxi drivers, hotel porters. Those people are earning cash tips, and they are able to make more money. Our guide, who you saw a picture of, Ileana, she was an attorney, and she gave that up to go into guiding full time because it's more lucrative, and she can support her daughter and her family better in that industry.
You mentioned doctors. There's one question. We're going to do this one last question, and then we're going to show the interior video, and we'll come back to more Q&A chat. So if you have additional questions, please put them in there, and we'll get to them after this next section. But the last question before we do that is Cuba is known for educating many doctors and sending them around the world. Is healthcare good for the average person there? And do they have access to modern medicine?
So that is a really great question, and it also opens up additional questions, because I'm going to say yes, healthcare is free, and it is some of the best healthcare in the world. If you have a heart attack, if you break a bone, if you have high blood pressure and need to be monitored, if you have a stroke, any of the above, You go to the hospital, you have top of the line healthcare. That's why Cuban doctors are sent all the way around the world, because they are some of the best in the world. But then, excuse me, but then you may say, well, why are we bringing Advil and cough medicine and allergy medicine and things like that? Why, if they've got free healthcare, why are they in such great need of that? It's the things that we take for granted that they cannot get. Things over the counter, things at a pharmacy, senior adult aids, canes, walkers, undergarments, children's books and toys and things like that, in addition to standard over-the-counter medicine for day-to-day things, are virtually impossible to find. That's where the black market comes in if you really need something. And that's where we come in terms of bringing these types of things for them to be able to have.
I always found fascinating that one of our contacts down there told me about a time she did need to go to the hospital for a procedure, and it's essentially the care is outstanding. The doctors are well educated. The care is outstanding, but it's BYOS. Bring your own sheets, because even at the hospital they don't have the supplies. You have to bring your own sheets.
I'll tell you, I unfortunately had an experience in the hospital with a member of a group once. She actually had an accident. She fell and she dislocated her shoulder, and she actually fractured it. And she was in such great pain, we had to take her to the emergency room. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to be in this emergency room in Cuba. I have no idea what, I feel so bad for the girl. I don't know how this is going to go. It was the most pleasant, I mean, aside from her injury and her pain, it was the most pleasant hospital experience I've ever had. She was taken right away within 2 hours max. She was seen, treated, bandaged, diagnosed, and given medicine that she needed, and out the door.
But we still do not recommend going to the hospital in Cuba.
No, not on my watch.
To go to the hospital. So, all right, with that, let's move on to the interior section. Thanks, Bill, for all of the input thus far, and then we'll come back and do a little more Q&A later.
We have now left Havana, and we're heading inland, if you remember the map, to visit Cienfuegos, Santa Clara, and Trinidad. We stop at the Che Guevara Memorial. This is a huge monument for a man who was larger than life in Cuba. Che Guevara was Fidel Castro's right-hand man during the revolution. And here we come and learn more about him. We visit his mausoleum. So we've arrived in Santa Clara, and we're going to visit the synagogue of Santa Clara. You're about to meet David Thatcher, this gentleman in the blue shirt, who is the president of the Jewish community here. He is a passionate and dedicated leader who gets very emotional about the visits that we bring to them and the goods that we bring to them. And he's a very special gentleman. So inside the Santa Clara synagogue, David will spend a little bit of time talking to us about the Jewish community in the interior of Cuba. As you can see, the synagogue itself is much more modest than the previous two synagogues that we visited. This is the extent of the main sanctuary. There's an upstairs area, an outdoor courtyard, which you'll see in a little bit. So here's a moment in time of David talking very passionately, as you can see by his body language, about his Jewish community and the importance of our visit. And questions and answers with him are always very emotional and very exciting. And he really expresses his gratitude for us coming to visit. He's very proud to show the one Torah they have. It was a Torah that was donated by Hadassah of Pittsburgh. This is the rooftop that I mentioned here on the courtyard. Behind him is actually a depiction of the old city of Jerusalem, but it's kind of his pride and joy. We take our groups to visit for a day trip to the colonial town of Trinidad. Trinidad is this small town. It's about an hour outside of Cienfuegos. And we take a tour of the main courtyard, the bell tower, the cities. We have lunch, a little bit of time to meander around on your own, do a little shopping, take this really cool picture on the main square. Another stop we make while we're in the town of Trinidad is to a pottery store where all of this artwork that you see here is actually made on site by the Santander family. The Santanders are a 5-generation family that have run this pottery store, and they create all of their work on site. And again, it's another great opportunity to bring home some souvenirs, and you know that they're authentically made because they're making it right in front of you. Music is everywhere. You never know when you're going to just find a random musician on the street playing some music, trying to get a couple of extra coins, or sometimes even a whole band. This is known as the Cantores de Cienfuegos. They are a choral group who sing like you just can't believe. You see this group of people and you think you're going to hear something really nice, and you hear something that blows your socks off. And yes, we're going to play a little snippet for you. Voices are just beyond belief. Our last and final Jewish community that we visit is the Jewish community of Cienfuegos. Now, as you can see, we're sort of in a synagogue, right? But not really. We're actually in the home of Rebecca Langus. This woman right here in the striped shirt, right there. This is Rebecca. She does not have a synagogue. She has transformed her living room into a synagogue on an as-needed basis. Behind the curtains is her living area, her bedrooms, her kitchens, her bathrooms, but her living room is transformed into a congregation on an as-needed basis. She hosts she serves about 15 people who live in the area. Sometimes she piggybacks with David Thatcher in Santa Clara, but he's about an hour away. So on most occasions, for an occasional Friday night for Simcha, Rebecca will host members of the Jewish community and have a service. You can see she's got some Judaica, she has some Sidurim. All of these items were donated by people like us through the years. She's a very special lady, and her purpose is so meaningful because this Jewish community is isolated from much of the rest of Cuba. So to come into her home and see what she does and meet her, give her a donation, it means the world to her. And you walk away feeling very, very like you did something special. Speaking of music, a little bit more, is the Benny Moré School of Art. Benny Moré is sort of the father of Cuban art. He's revered like Louis Armstrong is in New Orleans. And this entire School of Art is where many children get their first start at the arts. Some of them are into the graphic arts. Some of them are into musical instruments, and some of them are into dance. And last but not least, just a little taste of some of the fare. Beans and rice at every meal, lots of vegetables, fish, chicken, definitely enough to keep you satisfied during the course of your tour. And that concludes our tour. Got to end on a tasty note. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you felt like you got a good taste of Cuba. And if anybody has any questions, we are happy to stand by. And Jeff, feed me what you got.
Bill, thank you very much for taking us on that tour through the Cuban interior. Lots of other questions coming in that we will get to shortly. Let me just put a plug. If you don't already like us on Facebook, please do so you can stay up to date as we do other sessions like this. There's always interesting things going on. We've been posting some travel chats these last few weeks, as we're not traveling right now, so we're doing a lot of chatting, as a lot of people are. Focused on the chat over travel right now. We're very much looking forward to getting back to the travel part of it, hopefully soon. Okay, a couple other questions for you right now. Are there any limitations on what you are allowed or not to take pictures of?
I know of no limitations. I think it is discouraged to take pictures of policemen, but other than that, unless you go into a museum like here in the U.S., that says no photos allowed, photos are pretty well accepted.
I think the only time I can remember is at the Che Memorial. They ask you to limit photography in the lower section.
Inside the mausoleum, yes, you can take pictures outside freely, but there's nothing really abnormal about limitations to take pictures beyond certainly.
A food question. You ended on the food picture. So how easy would it be for a vegetarian to navigate the food?
Well, listen, our goal is to make everybody comfortable. We have been able to accommodate almost every dietary need on our tours, except for strictly kosher. But vegetarians, every meal will have a fish option. Every meal has rice and beans. Every meal, I had some people on a recent trip who had some real strict needs. They were celiac, low salt, all that kind of stuff. The Cubans are very hospitable. As long as you tell us and we tell them, they will make anything possible.
Okay, so we are approaching the end of the hour. We've been together for an hour, and I think we'll start to wrap things up unless there are other questions. There's a few that are coming in. Can you travel to Cuba through Canada? You can't really travel anywhere right now. So when things begin to open up again, we'll see what the new world looks like. We actually do have a trip on the books right now with our traveling university with Professor Stephen Burke. That's for March 14th through 2021. We remain hopeful that by then travel will have begun again to destinations outside the United States. So if you're interested, you can find information about that online. And if there's nothing further, Bill, let me say thank you to you for taking the time to lead us through everything. Thank you to everybody for taking your time out to join us for this virtual tour through Cuba. And we very much look forward to seeing you back out there in the real world very, very soon.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jeff. Good job.
Thank you.
Okay. Good night.